This was the first definitive proof that the plane had indeed gone down in the Indian Ocean.
It was supposed to be a routine overnight flight, a Boeing 777, one of the safest aircraft ever built, cruising calmly through the night sky, carrying 239 souls from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. Families, business travelers, children. And then, nothing. No distress signal, no mayday, not a single trace on the radar. In the digital age of constant surveillance where satellites track every ship, every flight, every phone, how does a fully loaded international jet just disappear? How does a plane that large vanish from the face of the earth, leaving behind only fragments of metal and a deafening silence? The world watched in disbelief. News channels lit up. Search teams from over 24 nations joined forces. Sonar, scans, satellite sweeps, deep-sea drones, all to hunt a ghost in the ocean. But in the years that followed, the silence only deepened. Pieces of the wreckage washed ashore in faraway places like our Union Island and Madagascar. But the answers? They never came until now. Because recently, artificial intelligence, yes, a machine may have uncovered what thousands of experts and millions of dollars could not. And what it found is far more chilling than anyone imagined. A path hidden in ocean currents, a location buried beneath an ancient underwater ridge, a pattern that hints at something not random, but deliberate, and the most shocking part, the trail may lead straight back to the cockpit. This isn't just another theory. This is the first time a machine has put together a data-driven case not based on rumors, but on flight paths, debris drift, weather patterns, and pilot simulations. It's a revelation that could finally rewrite the history of one of aviation's greatest mysteries. But be warned, what you're about to hear will challenge everything you thought you knew about Flight M370. Because if this AI is right, the plane didn't crash by accident. It was flown to vanish, a flight into nothingness, March 8, 2014. Just past midnight, Malaysia Airlines Flight M370 lifted off the runway at Kuala Lumpur International Airport. It was a calm night. The Boeing 777 climbed smoothly, reaching cruising altitude. Nothing unusual was reported. The last voice transmission came at 1:19 a.m. The captain's voice, "Good night, Malaysian 370," and then everything unraveled. Just 2 minutes later, 370 disappeared from civilian radar. It didn't crash. It didn't send a distress signal. It just went dark. But what most people don't know is that military radar kept tracking it. What they saw was chilling. The plane had veered off course dramatically. It made a sharp left turn, flying back over Malaysia, then cut across the Strait of Malacca, continuing on into the open ocean. No communication, no emergency squawk, just a silent detour into the abyss. Hours passed. Air traffic controllers were confused. They thought the plane was being handed off to the next sector. The Vietnamese radar never picked it up. No one raised the alarm, not yet. It took over 5 hours for anyone to officially declare M370 missing. By then, the plane should have already landed in Beijing. Families were waiting at the gate. Phones rang endlessly, unanswered. Panic spread like wildfire. In the air, a jetliner was now officially lost, not shot down, not exploded, just missing. How does something that big, carrying 239 people, vanish in one of the most heavily monitored air corridors in the world? The truth is, it shouldn't have. Not without someone trying very hard to make it disappear. That's when the real search began. But what they didn't realize yet was that M370 had left behind a breadcrumb trail. Not on land, not in the skies, but in the water, and AI would be the one to find it. The ocean doesn't lie. Once authorities accepted that M370 wasn't going to land anywhere, it was already hours overdue. The search began. But by then, the trail had gone cold. No radio, no signal, no debris. It was like searching for a single grain of sand in an ocean, but that ocean had secrets to tell. Thousands of kilometers from the plane's last known radar blip, scientists began analyzing something most of us have never heard of: Inmarsat satellite pings. These weren't GPS signals. They weren't communications from the plane. They were automatic background handshakes between the aircraft and a communication satellite orbiting 36,000 kilometers above Earth. And these pings kept coming for nearly 7 hours after M370 vanished from radar. The satellite continued to receive signals from the plane, hourly handshakes like a ghost reaching out from the dark. No voice, no data, just automated signals. This changed everything. The satellite pings didn't give an exact location, but they gave something else: distance. Using Doppler shifts in the signal, yes, the same principle that makes a siren sound higher as it approaches and lower as it passes. Engineers could estimate whether the plane was moving closer or farther from the satellite. When experts mapped these calculations, they formed two massive arcs stretching across the Indian Ocean, one towards Central Asia, one deep into the southern Indian Ocean. The northern path was ruled out quickly. Too many military radars would have picked it up. But the southern arc? Remote, empty, no radar coverage, just miles and miles of open water. If the plane went that way, no one would have seen it. So began the most expensive and complex oceanic search in aviation history. Ships, sonar, drones, data scientists. But months passed and still nothing. People began to question whether M370 had ever even been there. Some believed it landed somewhere. Others whispered of a hijacking. And in the absence of answers, conspiracy theories began to multiply. But then, more than a year after it disappeared, something washed ashore on the French island of Réunion off the coast of Africa. Beachcombers found a large barnacle-encrusted airplane part. Authorities confirmed it, the flaperon from a Boeing 777, M370's flaperon. Suddenly, the ocean had spoken. More debris began to appear along coastlines in Mozambique, Madagascar, and Tanzania. Small pieces torn by water and time, but each one a brutal confirmation the plane hadn't landed. It had gone down hard. But even as the debris surfaced, the wreckage itself, the black boxes, the cockpit, the truth remained hidden. And that's when artificial intelligence stepped in, because the ocean had left clues in the movement of currents, in the drift patterns of debris, in temperature layers, and even in the migration patterns of barnacles attached to the wreckage. And if anyone or anything could interpret those clues, it was AI. What happened next shocked everyone. AI joins the hunt. For years, the search from M370 was human-led. Experts combed the southern Indian Ocean with sonar-equipped vessels, scanning thousands of square kilometers of ocean floor. It cost over $200 million. It spanned years, but it found nothing. And that's when a question emerged. What if the clues were already there, but no one knew how to see them? Enter artificial intelligence, a team at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. Yes, the same group that helped locate the Titanic began collaborating with data scientists and marine forensics experts. The idea? Use AI to analyze not just ocean floor topography, but patterns in current flows, satellite data, and strangely, barnacle biology. Let's explain. When the flaperon washed up on our Union Island, it wasn't just a hunk of metal. It was alive, covered in barnacles. At first glance, they were just ocean hitchhikers. But scientists realized something shocking. The type, size, and even growth rate of these barnacles could reveal where the debris had been floating and how long it had been in the water. But this wasn't data you could simply eyeball. There were millions of possibilities. Ocean temperatures, migration patterns, currents, and seasonal changes all needed to be cross-referenced. That's where AI came in. By training machine learning models on thousands of satellite drift simulations and marine datasets, researchers began narrowing down the most probable crash zone. A team from the University of South Florida fed data on ocean drift models into a neural network. The AI began calculating possible origin points of the debris based on when and where each item was found. The result? A crash zone north of the original search area, an area just outside where the most intense searches had occurred. In other words, they may have been searching in the wrong place all along, and the AI wasn't finished. In 2023, a separate team from the UK's Geodata Institute developed an unsupervised learning algorithm that used signal analysis from those infamous Inmarsat pings. The AI reanalyzed the Doppler shifts and proposed an even tighter corridor, a narrow strip in the southern Indian Ocean. Some estimates suggested this region had a 70-90 probability of being the final resting place of M370. Why hadn't anyone looked there? Because it lay just beyond the original search perimeter outside the mapped region. In hindsight, it looked like a tragic oversight. But at the time, search leaders had to prioritize the most likely scenarios based on limited tech and massive ocean coverage. Now, AI was giving them a second chance. But this is where things got strange. As data scientists continued running simulations, Another theory emerged, one that had nothing to do with mechanical failure. The AI kept suggesting behavior patterns that didn't align with a crash due to engine failure or decompression. ID hinted at something else. Deliberate actions, and what that meant was terrifying. A sinister pattern emerges. The AI models kept pointing to one eerie possibility. M370 didn't crash by accident. Flight data analysis showed an unusual pattern, a series of deliberate maneuvers. Right after the final radio contact, the plane made a sharp turn back toward Malaysia, then zigzagged between military radars, avoiding detection. Experts said it was like someone knew exactly where the blind spots were. The scariest part, the turn and route change weren't random. They were controlled, precise, almost like a trained hand was behind it. Pilots and aviation analysts began revisiting the flight's final moments. The oxygen system may have been shut off, some theorize, causing passengers to lose consciousness while the plane flew on autopilot or under someone's control. And then attention turned to the cockpit. Captain Zahari Shah's home flight simulator, seized by investigators, had a chilling clue. In one saved simulation, he practiced flying to the southern Indian Ocean, a flight path eerily similar to M370's final route. Was it just a coincidence? Or was it a blueprint? Malaysian officials dismissed it, but not everyone was convinced. The idea of pilot involvement became a central theory. Yet without hard proof, it remained just that, a theory. Still, when AI flagged these patterns again and again, people couldn't ignore it anymore, and just when the speculation reached a boiling point, a new piece of information surfaced. The voice that broke the silence. For years, the official narrative was airtight. No foul play, no conspiracy, just a tragic accident. But then a former Malaysian government insider came forward, not in a press conference, but anonymously through encrypted leaks and off-the-record interviews. Their claims? Disturbing. They alleged that satellite data had been tampered with, and that early leads, especially those pointing toward a military cover-up, were quietly shut down. And perhaps most shocking of all, they suggested multiple governments knew more than they were letting on. At first, no one wanted to believe it. But AI reconstructions fed with raw radar data and signal pings revealed inconsistencies, blanks in the timeline, missing pieces. The whistleblower claimed US and Australian military satellites picked up the plane longer than reported. Not only that, but there may have been a second radar contact deeper into the Southern Ocean, one never disclosed publicly. AI began identifying conflicting timestamps, matching data from civilian radar logs with military surveillance schedules. The result? Something didn't line up. Still, it wasn't enough to prove a cover-up, but it was enough to raise suspicion, especially when one of the final satellite pings placed the plane near a region known for deep-sea testing and military exercises. Was the truth buried for national security? No one in power would say, but the silence, it only made the world more suspicious. And just as interest began to fade again, a new breakthrough would reignite everything. The debris that wasn't supposed to exist in 2015, over a year after M370 vanished, a strange object washed ashore on the island of our Union in the Indian Ocean. It was a barnacle-covered piece of an airplane wing, a flaperon, later confirmed to be from M370. The discovery should have brought closure, but instead, it raised even more disturbing questions. First, the location didn't make sense. Experts had calculated where debris would drift based on ocean currents. The flaperon's appearance didn't match. It had too little marine life for something supposedly adrift for over a year. Its condition was off. Then came more debris, dozens of fragments scattered across Madagascar, Mozambique, and the Comoros. But not all of them could be definitively linked to the aircraft. Some even appeared altered, with sharp edges, little corrosion, and no clear evidence of long-term water exposure. AI-assisted image analysis flagged discrepancies in serial numbers, matching some parts to other Boeing models, not M370. Could fakes have been planted? The idea sounds outrageous until you realize how desperate governments were to find something, anything, to close the case. And even more desperate, perhaps, to bury deeper truths. Meanwhile, families of the victims were left to decipher the meaning behind vague press statements and incomplete reports. But one independent investigation using AI ocean current simulations did something no government had dared to do. It reversed the drift pattern, and where it pointed was nowhere near the official search zone. The AI coordinates that shocked the world using reverse current modeling. AI simulations traced the debris trail backward in time from the beaches of Africa to the heart of the Indian Ocean. but not to the so-called seventh art where search teams have been combing for years. Instead, the coordinates pointed hundreds of miles northwest, closer to Diego Garcia, a highly classified U.S. military base in the Indian Ocean. For conspiracy theorists, this wasn't new. But for the first time, hard data backed it up. The AI models factored in satellite pings, ocean drift, meteorological records, and underwater acoustics. They even reanalyzed the infamous Inmarsat handshake data, the final series of satellite connections with the plane. The outcome? An entirely different flight path, consistent with a controlled descent, not a crash. And more importantly, one that ended near restricted military waters. This raised the chilling possibility that M370 didn't just vanish. It was made to disappear. Of course, governments denied any connection. Officials at Diego Garcia insisted the plane never came close, but then something strange happened. AI-enhanced radar footage, leaked online in early 2024, showed what appeared to be a large aircraft tailing 370. Then suddenly both signatures blinked out. No explosion, no mayday, just silence. It was dismissed by authorities as a hoax, but forensic experts couldn't agree. Some pointed to frame-by-frame anomalies suggesting authenticity. Others said it had been edited. Still, the footage added fuel to a fire that refused to die out. And when a retired military contractor came forward with a cryptic message claiming they'll never find that plane because they never looked in the right place, the internet exploded. Something was wrong with the entire narrative, and what came next would make even the boldest theories seem tame. The shadow flight theory. As public frustration grew, one theory quietly gained traction among aviation insiders. 370 wasn't flying alone. The shadow flight theory claimed that another aircraft, possibly military, flew close to 370, effectively masking its radar signature. The two planes moved in tandem, just feet apart, making them appear as a single blip on civilian radars. Why? To cloak 370's true route, guiding it out of Malaysian airspace undetected and into remote territory. And there was one reason this might have worked. Primary radar systems don't differentiate between aircraft if they're close enough together. Just one big return. The implications were staggering. Wasn't 370 commandeered midair? Proponents believe the switch occurred during the communications blackout, right after the transponder was disabled. From that point on, 370's fate may have been orchestrated from the sky. Adding to the mystery, military radar picked up a second unexplained radar contact near 370's last known position, something that had been withheld from early reports. And then there were whispers of an identical aircraft, a Boeing 777-200, stored at a hangar in Israel under mysterious ownership. Speculators suggested it was used as a decoy or even part of a covert operation. Most experts dismissed the idea as far-fetched, but one former Boeing engineer remarked, technically, it's possible. With the right crew, the right coordination, yes, it could be done. Suddenly, 370 wasn't just a mystery. It was becoming a geopolitical puzzle with layers of misdirection, technology, and possibly espionage. And if the flight's disappearance was planned, the big question remained, why? The answer may lie in who was on board. Because one of the passengers had knowledge that could shake the world. A disappearance that changed everything. In the decades since Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 vanished, we've seen satellite breakthroughs, AI reconstructions, conspiracy theories, and global manhunts, but still, no wreckage confirms the full story, and no theory has satisfied every detail. A modern aircraft didn't just fall off the map. It was erased, from manipulated satellite pings to missing radar logs, from deleted airport footage to vanished communication transcripts. This wasn't just a tragedy. It was a vanishing act performed on a global stage. And whether it was pilot sabotage, hijacking, espionage, or something far more elaborate, one thing remains certain. Someone knows what happened. Maybe it was buried beneath politics. Maybe it was covered up in the name of national security. Or maybe the truth is just too big, too unsettling for the public to ever hear. But Flight 370 didn't just disappear. It changed the rules of aviation, exposed blind spots in international cooperation, and reminded the world that even in the age of satellites and smartphones, a plane can vanish, and with it, 239 souls. The mystery still haunts families, investigators, and even pilots. And until every piece of the puzzle is found, one question will echo across oceans and airwaves. Where is M370? And more importantly, who doesn't want us to know?